BIC episode number 121, and it is a special week. I'll explain why after the song plays. But let me just say, Brandon is off his steroids, so he may
Mhm.
be calmer, gentler. Although, to be honest, we'll talk about some comments that were left. I honestly thought he was very rational and calm last week, so I can only assume he will now be mellow. I'm just saying, just throwing it out there. So we're going to talk about comps again, but this time we're going to focus on the idea of the eye appeal, because eye appeal makes comps more complicated. We'll explain. There is some things that we're going to touch on, both modern and vintage. So there'll be some opportunities to see a little bit of both of those things. And we're going to talk about one of Eric's favorite topics, because our friends at Beckett have done it again. Magoo, you've done it again. That and more on this episode of the BIC podcast. Yes, under the watchful eye of Brett Favre. Back once again. There's going to be a couple of small topics that we'll touch on, and then we'll hit on a few major topics. And like I said, we'll finish off with the whole comp conversation, and I'll explain where I got that. But I actually want to start right off the bat. I'll start off with the silly card of the week, so we get that out of the way, and then we'll actually be able to touch on a couple of quick hitter topics before we get into the rest of it. So real quick recap from last week. We had 50 votes, so thank you all for participating in the only true democracy in this world. So last week we had the Griffey April Fool's card. We had Dennis Cook at the bat, as I dubbed it, and the Jumpman Cheeto! Exclamation mark. Now, listen, I'd like to be dramatic about this, but we're in Jumpman Cheeto's world, and we just live in it. Let's face it.
Did you see Steve Aoki placed a bid? He said he was
Ooh,
going for it. He was going to try to win Jumpman Cheeto.
it's exciting. There's still time. So I'll give you the totals. So the Griffey April Fools came in at 24%. Dennis Cook at the bat came in ahead of that at 32%. And with 44% of the popular vote, the Jumpman Cheeto reigns supreme in this land. So we thank you
Both
all for your
Cheetos were
support.
winners.
Cheetos are winners. So we thank you for participating. So on this week's Silly Card of the Week, brought to us by AMG Collectibles, amgcollectibles.ca, the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel. Steve, the collector of the scallops, collector of the people, has already given me some images that will be brought up on this week. And we've got some vintage packs this week. So there's your little sneak preview on something that we'll be touching on. Some cool stuff as always. So Steve always hits me up with some of the images ahead of time, and I get a chance to take a look at them. So if you do check out, links in the description. If you check it out, hopefully you'll enjoy. We've got some fun stuff that we'll be showcasing. So, and then we'll have some fun stuff that we'll talk about on the show as well. All right, so I've got some of the images here. We'll go through them. And then as usual, I will put a post in the community post, and you'll be able to vote whichever one you want. So I'll show the images of all the above. They're all picture ones, so you can see it for yourself. All right, so what we'll do here is we'll go Eric, we'll go Brandon, and then we'll finish off with myself. So we got our Silly Card of the Week candidates this week. So we'll start off with, let me quickly see if I can share. Let's click on this. Here we go. All right, so we got Trevor Linden, Eric. What do you got for us?
This is Vancouver Canucks great. There hasn't been a lot of greatness that has come through Vancouver. There's maybe 8 great players that ever played there.
I will have you know, Eric, that there were at least a dozen Hall of Fame rioters that came out of Vancouver, but I digress.
So, and this is one of their best players of all time. I think he probably holds most of the records up in Vancouver for longevity, games played, points, things like that. And this was a day in the NHL card by Leaf. And if you pulled this out of the pack, you didn't get, Trevor Linden lining somebody up, an action shot, slap shot, celebrating. No, you see him talking on the phone.
So first of all, if those of you have been watching for a while, Eric gets all in some kind of a weird headspace when he sees an NHL player just doing regular day-to-day things. It bothers him for some reason. And I'll have you know that this holding the phone to his ear while having his arm laid across, the rail there in front of the stairs is probably the most athletic thing he did all day. Everybody knows that NHL is like, oh my God, going to the NHL is like getting on your bike and riding for like 8 minutes and 1 second. Pointless. Honestly, anybody can do it. So right here, Trevor Linden, he's building up. What you don't see is 5 seconds later when he's building up a sweat. He's like losing 5 pounds because that phone holding to his ear. Just can we get off the phone? It's so hard.
So, this era, the 90s, they said, hey, let's stop putting pictures on the back of the cards too. So you get a twofer. You get an action shot here, you get an action shot there, and the action shot in the back is him driving around town.
Again, a strenuous activity, Brandon. This is the hardest he's worked all day. Between lifting the phone, and he's probably doing some defensive driving. Like there's some serious defense. Look, he's riding through. He's trying to avoid all the riders.
Doesn't look like he has a seatbelt on either.
Like, he's living dangerously.
Yeah.
He's going to the safe space of hockey because everybody knows that's the safest place in a life of constant danger. Trevor Linden is a man of mystery, living in constant danger, and Eric is trying to downplay the most dangerous part of his day. Just saying.
So I just when I would get a pack of cards back then and I'd pull some of this trash, I'd just be so upset.
Wow. Trash. I can't believe you would say that about Trevor Linden. That's horrible.
No, it's just I don't like opening up a pack of cards I paid for, looking for hockey cards, and I get just nonsense.
Wow. You wait until he throws that cordless phone at you. He will throw it with the velocity, with the quickness.
Well, that cordless phone probably weighs 20 pounds. So
that's what I'm saying.
Good chance.
That's an athletic feat.
Yeah.
I was very impressed. He probably had to hold that pose for hours. Who knows how long it took the photo to develop? My God.
It's a good thing they don't have nonsense cards now.
Hashtag maturity.
Yeah.
Do we really need to explain it? I feel like the picture explains itself.
It has nothing to do with the picture.
Yeah.
No, I know. When I say the picture, I'm talking about the actual picture of this card.
And the fact that he has his leg up and everything. Yeah, this is something else.
So this is a real person. It is his real name, and he does have other cards.
And very unfortunate for him. He probably should have renamed. He probably should have got his name legally changed.
Oh yeah, I would have.
I chose this one because of the pose.
Because you're a child?
Yes.
It's supposed to be silly, right?
I would agree. I'm just saying. We're sensing a pattern in your proclivities here, sir.
But look, if you keep reading and include the team name, you almost
keep reading?
Yes. Steve Shart's reading, and then we need the rest of the sentence there. Steve Shart's reading.
No, I think Sharts.
What does he read that makes him Shart?
Steve Sharts. That's the sentence.
Yep. I'd rather not explain any further. Listen, you two have taken us down a dark path. I'm going to class it up.
If he's going to start doing this stuff again, I still have some in the chamber.
Listen, so. I'll have you know, your childishness is being ignored. You know who else is ignoring your childishness? Dave Stewart. Because Dave Stewart's going to class it up around here.
Man, 91 Stadium Club. The tuxedos were in full effect in that set.
Yep.
Yeah, the Nolan. I wonder if he borrowed Nolan's tuxedo.
And my favorite part is that Dave Stewart didn't do a lot of smiling in this era.
I swear. I was just about to say that. I was waiting for my moment to say I didn't know the man had teeth. I've never seen the man smile.
He does when he gets to pose in a tuxedo, Eric, when he gets to suit up. That's all I'm saying.
I had no idea the man had teeth. That guy was so serious all the time. God, was he scary.
Classic. So there you go. Dave Stewart in a tuxedo. And right before, he did end up joining the, back in his Oakland A days, RIP to the Oakland A's. They don't exist anymore. So it is what it is. It happens. But nonetheless, I figured out this would be an appropriate countermeasure to a lot of the silly card of the week candidates this week. So there we go. So we had three levels of dress.
He must have hated being teammates with like Canseco and Henderson, because those two just complete clowns. Talented players, but complete clowns. And Dave Stewart is just, straight as an arrow, just serious all the time. And he has those two on his team that are just asshats. Unbelievable.
Well, we probably could have asked him, but Mark McGuire said he didn't want to talk about the past.
That's true. Mark Boy didn't want to talk about the past. That's not what he's here for.
Yep. So we can't check on that, unfortunately. So we'll have to just guess on this matter. There we go. It is what it is. But there you go. Some silly card of the week candidates for you. You can select your favorite choice when the community post appears. So be sure to exercise your right to the only true democracy in this world. Now, really quick, I just want to make mention of, I've talked about before that sometimes I'll pick up different kinds of stuff on ComC. I hadn't gone in and looked in a little bit. I'm still working on my 53 Bowman color set, and I was actually able to acquire a couple of 53 Bowman colors in ComC, which is, it's a nice spot. You can occasionally do it because some people do actually list some cards on there. So we got a Carl Furillo. Solid card. Fairly decent. Pretty clean. We got a little bit of staining here, but for the most part, not bad. To be honest, it kind of fits in with the rest of the set there. I appreciate that. And then also an Allie Reynolds. So there's 2 more. As we're slowly starting to take down the last couple. We're slowly making our way through it. But it's nice when I can pick up a handful here and there. So I figured I would take advantage of that. Like it when we can do the pickups. And tonight, as we're recording this, I have a couple of snipes set as well. So we'll see. If I win a certain cards in, we'll talk about it before, but it was kind of fun to have that. Now, one more thing I wanted to mention real quick, kind of in the same vein, before we get into talking about our favorite, because Beckett does it again. Beckett always does it. It's very exciting. But I gotta say, you know what I like, Eric, above all other things, and this will be just a quick thing I want to touch on. We touched on it on the Friday live stream, but I want to come back to it for a second. I like free. I like toss-ins that are free.
It's one of my favorite words.
Free's great. So I talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs baseball club.
You did?
A semi-pro team that plays out of here. They were the OG Maple Leafs, Brandon, because the hockey team was named after the baseball team. So this team plays in what's called the Intercounty Baseball League. It's semi-professional. It's a fun league. There are a lot of semi-pro players and some were D1 players, and actually some former major leaguers used to play there. Rob Butler, who had a cup of coffee in the major leagues, actually played in that league before. So it's decent baseball is what it is. And it's very inexpensive, and it's just kind of fun. They play at Christie Pitts, which is actually it's basically a ballpark that's owned in Toronto. And they don't charge for tickets. It is free. The public can go and watch the game anytime they want. And they have their games like everybody else on there. They make their money from concessions, and that's really where the team earns its stuff. But one of the things they have is they have what they call the blue and the gold membership. So it's basically a way of supporting the team. But if you get the gold membership, you get a jersey included with it. So like imagine buy season tickets or something. You're basically getting certain perks. You get discounts for merch. You actually get 10% discounts at some local restaurants and things that support the team by sponsoring it. They're like, there's the Left Field Brewery, a microbrewery there in Toronto. You get 10% off beer. Nice. All right. That's cool. And that's for any time you want. So overall, a decent value. In and of itself, a decent value. But one of the things they had, their promotion was the first 40 people to purchase one of these gold memberships this year would be invited to a Blue Jays game in May in a luxury box. Oh.
Ooh.
Yes. The gold membership is $300. So the jersey already is covering a chunk of that. And then you tack on some of the other miscellaneous swag they'll give you. You get an autographed baseball. There's a couple of other things that are included in there. So already you're doing all right. And then you get discounts on away games as well. You get discounts at the brewery. You get discounts on concessions and food and all these things. But then you get invited, if you're inside of the first 40 ones to get it, you get an invitation to a game at a luxury box. Well, at that point, Eric, we're in the black. Like a seat at the luxury box at a baseball game? Listen, that ain't a cheap seat.
No. So have you heard if you were in the top 40?
Oh, I may have emailed them and they said, Carlos, you're in for the promotion.
Well, that is wonderful.
Oh, yes. Yes. See, I like free, Eric. I like me some free. Wonderful time. So I will be happy to support the local intercounty baseball team this season and check out probably the only Jays game I'll go to this year from a luxury box. Let's go.
Good for you.
Instead of dealing with the commoners. We will not be dealing with the commoners, Eric. We got to go and be special.
Right.
And even better when it's free. Even better when it's free. Good times. All right. So, shall we go to Beckett being Beckett? So, really quick, before I get into a lot of the fun we're going to have with this one, I must say, I should probably give some background. I think the fairest thing for me to do is to give a little bit of background. We give Beckett a lot of crap, and it's justifiable, honestly. Well, for it's justifiable for the rest of us. Eric is just like, there's a psychological issue there. But for most of us, there are legitimate reasons why you may want to do that. And one of the big reasons why you may want to do that is they do a lot of very dumb things. And it isn't like they've done it once, twice, and this isn't like they've done it recently only. It goes back years. I have my infamous story about a submission gone wrong where they flipped the entire order and all the labels were on the wrong cards. Mickey Mantle was on a Sandy Koufax rookie. The Sandy Koufax rookie had a Mickey Mantle label because Mickey Mantle and Sandy Koufax are the same person, apparently. Different years and brands and everything go in. There's all kinds of stuff. We talked about the other day, I think it was this past live stream, I believe, on Friday. We had the Jordan rookie that was upside down. Jordan rookie was upside down. That was, a great one. And by the way, that goes back a couple of years. It wasn't recent either. It was the original time that was actually done, encapsulated, was years ago. So I'm going to leave in the description a link to a YouTube video from Murph's Card Town, who did a submission. And the title was Our Last Beckett Submission Reveal, where the guy goes on a mini rant. Because, and this is actually a problem that has cropped up before. So the reason I want to bring it up, other than mockery and my entertainment, is that this is a consistent problem with the Beckett slab and the Beckett slab design. And also I'm going to bring up something that still hasn't been resolved. So part of the reason we make fun of them. So I'll come back to it. So here, I'll just quickly show you a screen grab of this. So on here, you can see there's a Jason Tatum card. And the problem, if you pay attention, is on the label. The label, that blank space on the right, is not by design. That label is actually supposed to be over to the right. It's supposed to be in a slot, and then the Beckett logo would be on the left, but the label is completely over the top because the label, that little groove that is inside of there where the label is supposed to go, it is not unusual for the label to get dislodged. And on this order, like half the order, like 5 of the cards had the label completely dislodged. And if you really pay attention, you can tell the metallic label looks like it's bent as well. So they just have trouble getting it to stay there, and it's not really sealed in there. So the label can bounce around. Now you can tap it back into place, generally speaking, but that's a design flaw. It's been a design flaw for a long time, and they haven't been updating these labels. And part of the reason I bring this up is that in addition to the errors that I've talked about before, and this is just another example of an error they've had, they were supposed to be looking into updating these holders. And if you remember, because people forgot, because it's been so long and there's been so much stuff that has gone on between now and then, there was a rash of fake Beckett slabs that had been successfully replicated. Go ahead, Brandon.
Well, I was just gonna, you said, they were supposed to update. Remember, 2022 National is when they had the, whatever you want to call it, setup with supposedly what was going to be a new slab and everything. So that tells you now we're only, 3.5 months from the 2025 National, and nothing has changed. So it's been quite a while.
Well, the original issue was back in 2020. So the fake slabs was in 2020, and they even addressed it on a Beckett podcast episode. And what was funny was the host was trying to lead it. He was trying to help, they had one of the Beckett guys on there. I forget who it was, but I think it was one of the key guys at Beckett Grading. And they were trying to give tips on things to look out for on the holder. If you saw some telltale signs they were trying to give. And as the host started trying to give, things about fonts and different things, the other guy literally goes, "Oh no, there are some variances in the suppliers we use. So actually some of those are legit." And I'm like, wait, so you don't even know what the variances are on your own holders based on your own, this is back in 2020, on your own suppliers for your own holder, you have variances that could lead someone to look at something that looks a little bit funky. It might be fake, or it might actually be real. It might just be a different supplier used. What? And that was back then.
I know the last time I looked up the patent for the slab, it had expired. They didn't pay the dues to renew the patent, so there was that as well.
Yeah, but the point here, in addition to our continued entertainment, is they have a long-standing track record of this is something that actually should have been identified and done, fixed a long time ago. And then on top of everything else, the holder itself is defective in the way it's designed, where the label can't stay in place. It's not unusual. That's not the first time I've seen that. It's not the second time. That's not the 50th time I've seen that. It's a pretty common problem So to have somebody pull an order and half their order has the label misskewed, and you could probably just tap it back into place, but why should you have to? Why should that be a requirement for you to adjust it to make it look proper? Because the label doesn't stay where it's supposed to go. So Eric, before you unleash, Brandon, if you got any thoughts, feel free. Otherwise, we'll let Eric have the floor for a moment of our
Well,
collective entertainment as he continues to be a man of peace.
I just want to I want to be. I don't even know the word I want to use. When I started building my Nationals collection, it was the first time that I ever was interested in graded cards. And at that time, Beckett was pretty much the superior in grading, especially for the modern stuff. And so I was building my collection in Beckett slabs. Now, overall, I didn't at that time, like I said, I wasn't really much into grading and the slabs and everything. I didn't have any problems with them. But when I fast forward to today and I look back throughout the time of, since from then to now, and how many cards I have graded along that path, there's one company out of the main four that I've never used, never had any interest in using, and that's Beckett. I've used PSA, I've used, obviously I've used SGC and I've used CGC, and I have never, ever, ever even attempted to use Beckett. They've reached out to me to ask if I would bulk submit for them, and I had no interest. A big reason why is little things like that. I was going to pull it up and show, but I didn't want to take time looking for it. There is a Ryan Zimmerman 05 Topps Chrome, I believe, in a Beckett slab right now on eBay that has an autograph grade, except for the fact the card is not autographed. I thought that was pretty damn cool. I have a couple slabs. yeah, but
Gordie Howe. There was a graded a non-autographed Gordie Howe card, a 10 auto.
Yeah, this one's a 10 auto too.
so there's let me add it. There's a second card.
Yeah, it's a 05. I think it's Topps Chrome. It's either the Topps Topps Update or the Topps Chrome, Ryan Zimmerman. But there's one on there that has an auto grade and it's not an autograph card. But anyway, nothing surprises me. Like, the biggest thing that surprises me of Beckett right now is that they are still in business. That's honestly the only thing that surprises me with them. If there's a card that I need for my collection or that I want to add, like especially like the Michael Taylor stuff, most all of his autos are going to be in Beckett slabs because that was from 2014. I'll buy the slab, but I don't know what they're ever going to do to become, or if they could ever dig their way out of the hole that they're in. I don't think they can. And
I think if a random company bought them, the thing is, a lot of people look to Fanatics to get the last one for the Infinity Gauntlet, but a well capitalized. This kind of goes back to what I wanted to get to, and then I'll let Eric unleash. There is a desperation, and I'm going to call it desperation because at this point it's desperation from some nostalgic folks that remember Beckett, the golden era of Beckett, and they want so badly to restore it because they have some fond memories of the magazine and the early days of the grading and everything, because there were some significant cards that wound, especially for the basketball guys, some significant cards that to this day are still in BGS holders. So that cannot be doubted. But because of that, they have overlooked and looked past issue after issue, problem after problem, and over, because they're hoping against hope that one day they will be basically bought out by somebody else, and then they fix a couple of things, and then all of a sudden all is great at Beckett again. The thing for me is I'm sitting there, I don't have that attachment to it. I remember Beckett, but to me Beckett was a tool.
I don't know that they would though, because they're
getting 50,000. They're getting 50,000 cards a month being garbage.
I still think some of that's people trying to get black labels on the Pokemon. I
And
mean, I
and
could be
you would,
wrong.
but you would still get that. Plus, the basketball guys there are basketball guys, Brandon. I'm being serious. I know there are some basketball guys who would love nothing more than to send Beckett 1,000 cards today if they weren't doing such a crappy job. They know that it
See,
would be stupid, so they don't want to.
the main reason that I've chosen not to use them, it really doesn't even boil down to the shit that they've done or not done. It's the price. Like, sure, they claim they don't have upcharges or anything, but neither does SGC on anything that's 2000 to present. So why would I pay more to get the Beckett slab? Like, it just, at this point, with SGC's growth and them not upcharging on anything from, in the modern era, I don't know how Beckett could recover that much to become back in, to even overtake SGC in the sports slot. I just don't think it would happen. I could be completely wrong.
Yeah. I
but
think some of those
I
I think some of those basketball guys would surprise you because with the amount of defense they've done to Beckett, given all the issues they've had, in deep down in their souls, they want to patronize Beckett. They just know that Beckett has made it impossible, untenable in the current age. But they would literally ditch everybody else today if Beckett even showed a sign of life. If they showed a pulse, they would run, fleeing as quickly as they could to send all their Jordans, all of their LeBronses as quickly as they could. There's a handful, and some of them are whales, and they'll throw a crap ton at that. They'll keep Beckett afloat on their own. They want to do it, but they can't. They know it'd be stupid now to do it. Whatever's already in the holder is already in the holder. But I think they would desperately crawl back. Eric has 5 million cards he would send tomorrow if they sold it. 5 million cards. They're all Boston Bruins commons. They're all trash. But he would send them all today if they could fix it. Go ahead, Eric. Now's your moment.
What was the name? What was the title of the video?
Name is your best friend. Sorry,
no,
go on.
No.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Hmm.
Second, could you tell me the title of the video?
Of the video you've watched 50,000 times? Because that's a lot of watches. Our last Beckett submission reveal.
Okay.
Last in all capitals.
Typically, when a person says, that's it, this is the last time, what message are they trying to give? It is
Give me free gradings and all is forgiven. in this hobby, that's true.
Yeah, it's true, unfortunately.
Just say it. Rule number 1. Go on.
The message is, they've screwed me once, they've screwed me twice, they screwed me 3 times. This is the last time. So many people have stories, including you, about how this company has screwed them. Yet the majority of those people who have stories continue going back to the poison well. I don't understand it. Not only have they screwed the proverbial you, but they have screwed countless other people. And yet you submit again. And you say, this is the last time.
So since we brought it up in conversation, I just wanted to put it here. This is the February gem rate. So this is for the sports, not the TCG, the sports one. So Beckett in February still had 23,000 sports and miscellaneous. The TCG for them was higher. So here is 29,000 TCG for them. But they still had 23,000, which is about 23,000 and a half too high.
Wait, but hold on. Let's point something out. They're only 10,000 more combined than CGC is in sports, and CGC is not recognized in sports.
Yep.
That tells you how low they are on the poll right now. Like,
I agree, Brandon. But if another company
support is beeping slowly.
If another company, Brandon, had Beckett's last decade of track record, that would be minus 23,000. There would be a minus.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I'm not. I'm not
Beckett's name
disclosing
brand
that, like,
is basically
but
keeping the life. They haven't pulled the plug because the Beckett name has kept it on life support.
the fact that we all can sit here and have been around long enough to know when they were the top dog, and now they are a glimmer of hope.
Joke.
That says a lot, and it wasn't that long ago that they were the favored company. That train started rolling down the hill really quickly.
No, I get you. But like I said, I listen to more podcasts and things than the average person listens to, and I do listen to some of the basketball guys. And even in discussion, and I'm not talking 5 years ago. I'm talking about in recent. In the back of their mind, occasionally the Beckett subject will come up on its own. They'll talk about it, and then one of them, like clockwork, will be like, "Yeah, if they could ever get their act together, I'd love to send them a bunch of stuff. I want to send us some stuff there, but I know it doesn't make sense. It's tenable now." I'm paraphrasing. But basically, they would literally go out there and state these words. There's a bunch of them that are sitting back there that would love to send stuff to Beckett, even today, even knowing all the issues. But they know that the issues also hurt the resale. So what it comes down to, the resale is king. If the resale turned around, if you even gave them a glimmer of hope and you sold them off from the current holding company that has them to somebody else that says, all right, we'll spend some money, we'll fix the holder, and we'll take care of some of the other stuff, they'll be like, take me back, Beckett. It's weird. Like at this point, it's Stockholm syndrome. Like it's totally Stockholm. But there's something out there. They won't give up on it, Brandon. They just can't quit Beckett. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I mean, next week there'll be another story, and we'll be saying the exact same thing. And I'll say they're trash, and I'll call them a dumpster fire, and I'll say they're garbage. And why do people keep going back? And then a couple of more weeks will pass, and I'll say this company is trash. They're a dumpster fire. They're garbage. Why do people keep going back? I mean, I'm a broken record at this point. It's just lunacy to me why anybody would do business with these people. They've been bought and sold a bunch of times. Their owner is in prison again. Not for the first time. Again.
Also, the Beckett owner is better at going to prison than Joe Jackson. That's a joke off of an offline conversation. But I'm just stating as a fact. He's better at going to prison.
So
if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. So they've fired and brought in their management and brought in new people that were going to fix it all. Then you know what they did then? They fired the management and brought in new people that were going to fix it all. It's just fold the effing company and move on. Every single month, those numbers come up and it's minus whatever. Every single month. Minus. How does any company in the world survive when there's a minus next to your number every month? And how do you not just either shut it down, take what money's left, declare bankruptcy, whatever it is you have to do? It's just every month, minus.
Well, that's all fine and dandy, Eric. But the thing is, at over 50,000 cards a month, we don't know what their break-even number is. We don't know how many people they're actually. What if their break-even number is much, much, much lower, and they're actually profitable at 50,000 cards a month?
I don't know. I can't imagine.
But no, but I'm saying, Eric, if that's the case, why would you shutter it?
Well, they also
let's say you're trash and you're still making money.
Yeah, yeah.
They also have other divisions of grading that aren't composed into that number.
Sure.
They have the autograph authentication, they have the VHS grading, the comics, and so they have other avenues that Beckett Shield might be keeping the entire company profitable.
Beckett Shield is the only thing we can co-sign on.
Oh yeah,
Beckett Shield's fine. Beckett Shield's
That's what I'm
perfectly
saying.
fine.
Like Beckett Shield alone might put the company in, profitable, and everything else is just their hobby.
These things are the shit. These are the best. They're freaking fantastic.
You know what the great irony of it, Brandon, is? Whenever I submit my stuff for PSA, I still have my pack of Beckett Shields. I literally put them in the Beckett Shield semi
Yeah.
Those ones that they're great, by the way. They're very well
It's the
made.
best product
they're
they've
solid.
ever made.
It's
Yeah.
solid. No complaints. It's fine.
Well, no,
They do a good job.
Beckett magazine was good during our growing up years.
But
so-
we're talking about that's in ye olden times. Like
That's
it,
ye
that
olden.
it's been a while on that
And
one.
what's
We got to go
awesome
back a bit.
Beckett Shields is for work. We write on them. We write the price. We write what the card is, and we put them out in our display cases. People love them. You know,
Yep.
The best product they have, no question.
The
But
point is
in all
something-
seriousness, it could be keeping them afloat. It
maybe-
could be
Listen,
profitable.
something
not
is
cheap.
profitable.
They're not
Something is
cheap.
profitable.
They cost us more money to buy than a typical plastic
Semi-rigid.
semi-rigid. Yeah, I mean we could buy these all day, but the Beckett Shields they actually cost money. They're
Listen,
expensive.
Eric, quality comes at a cost.
And that's why we keep buying them, because they're really good.
Wow. I didn't realize this was going to be a Beckett promotion. Sponsor us. Look, you got cash, apparently. So fork it over. Let's hand it over. There you go. Perfect. Let's fork it over. Fork over some cash. Make it happen for you. But yes, so that's our weekly make fun of Beckett segment. that became an ad at the end. That was the best part.
If people are new to this, and I know that we're a little more serious here, follow us on Friday. I literally have a book that we document all of Beckett's bullshit in. So, this isn't a one-time thing, people. This is constant, and we're only keeping track, because I would have filled this up by now if we just didn't have an actual start point. So it's 5/31/24. What we started on. Okay, so if we get added all the stuff we know about before that, this would already be full. They're just a complete joke.
It would be nice if Eric would get off the fence and just say what he feels. Just throwing it out there. I think it'd be nice.
They
But-
suck.
We digress. We move
They
on.
suck.
So, with that said, we can touch on this one here. Quick thing that I wanted to make sure we touched on was repacks. Only reason for it. So, I'll quickly give the background. The only reason is that, Big Bri, good old BG, has challenged, he's thrown the gauntlet down to the influencers out there to debate him on repacks. Now, I don't think they've announced it, so I'm not going to give away too much, but we are of the impression, based on the Discord, that it appears that by midweek-ish, by the way, no one on the screen will be involved, just so we're clear. However, allegedly, by midweek, someone may be taking him up on that, and we'll see. There may be a live stream in the middle of the week. Again, TBD, they're the ones who have to announce it. So at the time of recording, they haven't officially announced it out there. It was just thrown out there. And there's a decent likelihood. If it happens, it happens, and we can always include a link to it after the fact. But they got to announce it first and do their own thing. That's their business. By the way, they're not paying for it. Maybe I should charge them for a link, Brandon. Like if they do announce it, I'm charging. Use one of your sponsors. You got plenty of them. But anyway, so assuming it happens, he's debating. And the whole crux of it comes from Neo's video where he was talking about questioning again the legality of repacks and the whole thing. I'm just giving you a high level overview. I'll give my stance on repacks. I don't care about them. I don't have any moral objection to them. I believe they can be done incorrectly. I believe they can also be done in a way that's fine. But again, they don't morally bother me at all. It goes kind of back to the old era of grab bags, but obviously more expensive. The stakes are higher now with what repacks are today. But repacks have also taken on a place in the ecosystem from the perspective of, and I'll use an example that Eric maybe will be familiar with. So at the expo, there's a couple of specific companies that literally set up there. So Hit Parade would be a good example. Hit Parade has a booth there. And obviously they're well known and they do a lot of different repack products. Well, they literally will buy stuff. So good example we can use. Steve, my buddy Steve Angel in Toronto, when we do the expo, he has a lot of great stuff on his tables. quality stuff. Well, the Hit Parade guys have come by and bought stuff from his tables, and they pay pretty strong. The idea being because those are quality cards that can then be great chases for the Hit Parade products. So the point is when you're buying it, you're getting there's some good stuff in there. They've got non-sports, they've got hockey specific, sports specific, all kinds of different boxes and things they make. But they're only one company of many that does this. So the point is they're an example that's known out there. Again, I have no moral objection to it. And I know Brian Gray obviously did his repack product back in the day. But the reason he threw his hat in the ring is because, of course, he has to. Every time there's an argument to be made, BG is there. If you guys go back, I will include a link in the description to a discussion that I had with BG on an unrelated topic. He likes to go in and argue. So we had like a 2-hour discussion. And then we talked about the discussion after that. So if you see the runtime and you're intimidated, probably the first 2 hours is me and BG. Just one-on-one, the two of us just talking back and forth. I believe I interrupted him 457,000 times because that's what you have to do, by the way, if you want to get in a word and edgewise. So just a tip to whomever may decide to engage in this. You must be willing and be prepared to interrupt regularly because Brian likes to make his point, but he likes to filibuster and make his point over 10 straight minutes. And if you allow that to happen, then you might have forgotten what the original question was by the time you finish the 10-minute soliloquy. So you need to interrupt regularly. Eric can attest to this. You guys watch me do it. You have to interrupt regularly. Otherwise, he'll keep moving goalposts. The topic will keep changing. He won't actually answer the question, or he will answer the question, but then come up with a bunch of scenarios and angles and alternative realities where this different thing happens. By the way, nothing wrong with that. It's very entertaining. So I'll say this. As a viewer, it's extremely entertaining. But if you're actually trying to get an answer and have a conversation, then you must be willing to interrupt. You must be willing to interject on a regular basis if you have any hope of actually having a conversation.
Back when Clubhouse was good, and he was one of the people that would come in, with 100 other people. I remember one time having a discussion with him, and I must have said his name like 7 times. Brian.
Bueller.
Yeah, just like trying to get a word in. It's like I want to participate in this conversation, but you're not letting me. But yeah. I mean, he doesn't. He will shut up and listen and participate in it back and forth. You just have to make him.
Yeah, that's why I'm giving it, Brandon. Hopefully it's understood the spirit that I'm giving. I'm just giving it as someone who has had this conversation, had the experience of doing this, the one-on-one kind of back and forth that he was asking about, that he's asking for in this. I don't have a horse in the race for the repack. I'm okay with it either way.
I'll never buy it.
You want to regulate it? That's fine. You don't want to regulate it? That's fine. I'm okay either way. We'll can have a little discussion. But I'm just saying, word to the wise, if you want to have this conversation, be ready and willing to interrupt regularly. Otherwise, it will not be a conversation. It will be you listening to Brian.
I actually mentioned it in the Discord, and I said, there's both sides of the fence. And that's with everything really in this hobby. You're going to have people that say they're good. You're going to have people that say they're bad. And really, I think Brian is a good one to lead the charge in voicing the supportive opinion because he has been in the business. He has made repack products. Now, my take on them is, again, they're just like everything else in this hobby. There's good and there's bad. And you have to figure out which one is which. And, it's no different than breakers. There's really good breakers that do things correctly, and then there's bad breakers. There's good dealers, there's bad dealers, right? There's good boxes and bad boxes. So there is a lot of good repack products out there. You mentioned Hit Parade. I've opened a couple of their hockey products. Really enjoyed them. I thought they were amazing for the price point. Leaf, Brian, he used to do his best of baseball, best of basketball, best of sport, like all of that. Those were really good products. They had a lot of solid value return. Now, when I say value return, we've just had discussions about the value return in manufactured hobby boxes. Mm-hmm. That is tough today. So you can't expect or say repacks are trash just because you might have bought one, opened it, and didn't get, you know, your full value return back on them.
Yep.
Especially when the manufacturers, you're probably at what, 90% clip that you're not going to get your return back in value
Yep.
buying a hobby box. So
Yep.
I know that it comes from things have expanded in the space. You have the whatnotters, you have the kitchen repackers, you have all these other ones, the eBayers trying to build repacks and stuff. There is likely a lot out there that is not good. I would totally agree with that, but I would not put them all in one basket and say repacks suck, because there are some that are pretty good out there.
No, that's fair, but I want to make sure that we touch on something important. And I wanted to give the initial, and then Eric, I'll go to you, but let me make sure I touch on one other thing. Key piece to this is that when we're talking about manufactured boxes, when I open up a box, so we'll use one that we talked about last week or the week before, EX2000, we had our critiques of the product. But here's the thing, we can give a full critique of the product because we can actually see the full checklist of the product. We know what hypothetically is possible to be pulled in said box of product. Again, hypothetically. We won't know for sure what you get, and we know that the majority of the boxes are probably not going to hold the value, so we know but again, we still have a full checklist. And I think where a lot of these repack products go wrong, and where the bad ones basically poison the well for a lot of the other ones, is you don't have the visibility. In a repack product, it's closer to a hand packed product because you're literally building these boxes out of it. You're buying the materials and you're building these boxes. Because of that, as a consumer, I have a different expectation of you, fair or unfair. So I'll throw this out as just something, and I want you guys to give me your take. My opinion with Hit Parade, I have a certain understanding of what it is they do. And again, I know literally people they buy these from. So I know there are good cards in the boxes because they do buy some quality. And I can see what they pay on some of that stuff. So I know they're at least paying for some of these quality because they won't just give away. The ones who have quality cards are not just giving them away. You have to at least offer them something that's worth their while. But the key piece here is a good repack product, in my opinion, is one where we have we're going in. You can open these boxes. You should have an understanding of what's available here, what's actually available, ideally a full checklist of what's available. And the more information you can give me about what the floor is, what the ceiling is, all these things, the more information you can give me, the more comfortable I am. And with a lot of the technology ones, if you talk about like Arena Club and that stuff, if you've got a dynamic checklist that updates as hits get pulled and all of a sudden it goes off a checklist, you can use technology in that sense to allow you to see, by the way, that hit, you wanted that J-Rub card branded, it already got pulled. So I can guarantee you, you will not be able to pull that card. That's a good piece of information to have. It doesn't mean you're not going to buy the pack because maybe there's something else that interests you, but it's still good for you to know that you have no shot at this specific hit because it's already been pulled.
Yeah, I agree. Having some sort of information, whether
Whatever
it's
you
a
can give
full,
me. My point is, I don't like repacks where I'm completely in the dark about everything.
right. No, I would agree with that. It maybe it's not a full checklist, but it's something, you know, notating chasers or whatever. Because, and the reason I say this, even though a manufacturer may produce a checklist, it's well known that the full checklist isn't necessarily rolled out at the initial release. One that comes to mind that was pretty significant was Panini and National Treasures. I believe it was the Odell Beckham rookie year. They released the product, and like they had the initial release, and then they had, you know, what was deemed or coined phrased the second wave. The Odell Beckham RPAs, who was the guy everybody was going after at the time, they were not even in the first wave of product. So you had people buying these, hunting for these cards that weren't even in the product yet, even though they were on the checklist. So I'm sure this happens. I mean, look at how many 101 chasers that are out there that still haven't appeared. You know, who knows where the hell they are, but I don't know that just because the checklist is nice of knowing the potential of what's in there, but we don't know. And this is the big holdup I have with a lot of the manufacturer stuff is I actually almost feel if you kind of know what the product in a repack is going to contain, your odds are better in the repack product than it is in manufactured products because they have so many different product allocations now with the retail format and everything else. You don't really know what the hell, which product the card, even though it's on the checklist, is going to wind up in. So that adds to the difficulty of even being able to find it. So in that sense, if they're maybe not full, but if they do have some sort of sell sheet, showing you some items that are in the product, I'd almost say the repacks give you a better chance in certain times. So
Well, I think if one is done properly, I would go further and I would say that if it's done properly, where at least you know how many boxes exist and you have some understanding
mhm.
of what's available in it, your odds are definitely better. Like
Yeah,
that doesn't mean you're gonna pull the best card, but it means as opposed to hundreds of thousands of boxes where maybe you get something, maybe you don't, it's all over the place, or you get some hits that are just kind of filler, whatever the case may be. It is possible to do sort of thing. But there is one other thing that I want to touch on that I know BG is going to argue about. But Eric, I want to get your thought before I add the next piece.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys summed it all up pretty well. I think the biggest thing about repacks is you just got to be careful. It's good to know that if the thing is reputable, it's good to know that, they're buying stuff off, someone that we know like Steve, and, he can tell you, a little bit, how they do business, and, and that gives you a better understanding, a little more comfortability. But my biggest concern with repacks is they're breakers who take all the good stuff, sell it, and then they have piles and piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of stuff that they determine to be junk, and they have to get rid of it or just throw it in the dumpster behind their building. So my fear is that a lot of this stuff is is considered, low end junk. And they put some chasers out there. They advertise that they have, 10, they advertise they have 10 good cards, but they have 100 boxes, right? So 90 of them are filled with complete trash. So, that's my concern. And I don't buy modern stuff like that. So unless someone starts doing a vintage hockey, repack, I don't see me ever getting involved in it or taking a chance. But it's another way to gamble. It's another way to throw your money away in most cases, as far as I'm concerned.
Which
But
I think is fine. By the way, I have actually seen a vintage repack. I've seen some.
yeah,
They're,
yeah,
by the way,
they
they're
they make
interesting.
them.
I've watched. Yeah, I saw one where they did like they opened up a bunch of packs of like 56 tops baseball and 53 tops baseball, and I have seen some football ones. So they're out there. There's almost any genre, any niche you want. I do want to make an important point though. I'm having this discussion because obviously Brian Gray has brought back Neo's video, kind of brought Brian Gray out of the woodwork. By the way, I'm still waiting for the Bill Master follow up. Anyway, just
any day
thought I
now.
would throw that out there. Just thought I would throw that out there briefly.
Any day now. Any day now.
But one important point that I did want to make is that I wanted to have the discussion, but I want to make clear I'm not promoting or advocating any repack product. But I gave you an example of one that I have some familiarity with. I haven't bought any Hit Parade, but at least I'm familiar with them. I've seen them around. I know of them. I have friends who have opened the boxes of them and had a decent experience with them. So I can at least speak to some experience with it as opposed to complete ignorance and not knowing a damn thing. And I also, again, am friends with someone that has sold product to the company that makes the Hit Parade products. So again, I can speak to it from that perspective.
I
But my point, go ahead.
I was just gonna say I've opened Hit Parade twice. One I purchased online, and then one my son got me as a gift. Um, Both of them were great for the cost. The one was their Young Gun. It was a Hit Parade Young Gun box. You were guaranteed at least one PSA 10 Young Gun in there. The chaser, I think, was a Crosby Young Gun. I ended up hitting three PSA 10s in one box, one being Nikita Kucherov, which put my value already in the good. And I think it wasn't Braden Point, but there was another really nice good one. And then there was a French Young Guns of I can't remember the guy's name. The other box was one where you could get an autograph or something in it, and I got a Jerome Insignia, or I can't say
Iginla.
his.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Iginla.
the Hall of Fame guy.
Yeah.
101 from the Expo. It was stamped from the Expo autograph. So
Sure.
good
Yeah.
product.
Yeah. So the point is, it's not to promote any specific one, but I wanted to use the example that I had because at least I have some background experience in them. Again, you got to do your own research on these things. I'm not gonna suggest any. It's not my job, but I wanted to make that caveat. I thought it was important, Eric, that we make that caveat. I'm not promoting any of them.
Just to be to be clear,
To be clear.
I did not say all repackers are thieves and put in their junk base after breaking boxes. That's not what I said. I said my concern is that some people are dishonest, and this is my concern of how they may go about business. Just so Brian Gray doesn't somehow say, well, I got word that on the Because I'm Carlos podcast, some idiot said all repackers do this. I want to make
See, Brandon,
sure.
that's all hashtag, covering our bases. Hashtag man of peace.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear what I said, that I was speaking of. My concern is I am worried about this. I never accused the entire industry of doing those things. I just wanted to be clear.
Mm-hmm.
To be clear.
Eric covering his legal angles. I love it. All right. So last point that I wanted to make, that I wanted to touch on, is that one of the key pieces that I think he's going to discuss, because he's already mentioned it previously, is that when he was doing his own repack product, speaking of Brian Gray here, when he was doing his own repack product, he said that he had consulted with a lawyer. And I have no reason to believe that's not the case. But one thing I would point out, and this is something that maybe, if this conversation we believe may occur in the next week or two happens, one key piece that I may want to discuss, that I would suggest to them to discuss, and I'll throw it out at them, is that that's great. But the thing about legal precedents when it comes to that is there are jurisdictions. Each jurisdiction may have a different interpretation of how they want to do or approach that kind of a thing. Example that I'll give you, sports betting. Sports betting is legal in some states. Sports betting is legal in Canada, in some provinces, under very specific circumstances, under the auspices of the local lottery corporation is what we call it. But in the States, I'm sure it's called something else. But the idea is the same. Gaming commission, lottery corporation, whatever. The point is, they've each got their own localized jurisdiction. This happened back in the poker boom, if you guys remember back then. Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker. There was suddenly an online poker boom. It went crazy. It was all over. It was a blaze. I remember it well. But the thing is, then there was a day that suddenly it got shut down in a lot of different places outside of Vegas in very specific zones. Over the years, it has now been opened up a little bit again. Sports wagering has definitely been increased on the rise, but it's not across the board. You got to pay attention to your local jurisdiction because some of them are not okay with that. Some of them are more okay with it than others. Some of them are like, yeah, in the casino, but not online. Some of them are in the casino or online, so you can do both. It depends. So just asking one lawyer about one specific product in one specific jurisdiction, that might have been true. And it might have also been true at the time. But what's the current interpretation of the law in the jurisdiction that you're planning on doing business may give you a different answer. And it's just about interpretation, who you're asking, and what judge is overseeing it at the time. That's why I say it's important that it's not a one-size-fits-all. Just because you spoke to a lawyer and stayed at a Holiday Inn Express last night doesn't mean that now your legal pronouncement is case law for the entire country, blanket. That isn't how it works.
I also, and I'll mention this, I kind of said a little bit of it in the Discord, but there's also the laws that exist that are ignored. And it could be a case of that. And I don't mean ignored by the people creating the product. I'm the government.
Yeah. You're talking enforcement. You're talking about enforcement.
Yeah, because I was curious. Fanatics creating these Tops Now chasers, they are literally called sweepstakes. Like when you go into read all the little fine print and everything, they call them sweepstakes. And I knew that there was some legality rules and all of that to sweepstakes. And so I just started looking around. In the state of New York, sweepstakes are supposed to be registered 30 days prior to the start of the sweepstakes. Well, as we know, Tops Now is an event happens, the card's up the next day kind of thing, right?
Yep.
There's no way they're registering them with, 30 days ahead of time before they're rolling them out. So I actually made several phone calls to get the head of the sweepstakes division in New York, and she confirmed, yes, that is the writing, but they don't hold to that. So,
Yeah. So like I said, we're talking the laws themselves and we're talking about enforcement. So
right.
the key point is just this though. I'm just saying one discussion with one lawyer about a specific product, you could be 100% true, 100% correct in everything you're saying. That still isn't an across the board. It applies in every situation, in every jurisdiction. So one example I'll give Eric to kind of that sports gambling thing. Here where I am in Ontario, we have online sports wagering. Well, one thing they do is you can use it. And I've actually got the online site and I've got it set up on my laptop so I can make a small wager if I want to. I can set it up. It's very easy to do once you set it up. However, one thing it does, and this is an interesting quirk, and maybe in the States you've got something similar, but I'm just giving an example. They actually have a little piece of software that you have to make sure you have turned on and installed that verifies your geolocation. Because if I am to make a wager on this site, it has to confirm I'm in the province of Ontario for me to be allowed to use this site. Because if I'm outside of this jurisdiction, it doesn't work. And if you don't use the geolocator, it doesn't work. It doesn't let you log in. Because the jurisdiction here has one set of rules. I move across the border one line over, it's a different set of rules. They've got their own gaming corporation. It may be very similar, but it's actually considered a different jurisdiction. So they've got their set of rules, and I've got mine over here. So I have to have that little, it takes 5 seconds, it's on. But as soon as it does, it just confirms, yes, you're in Ontario. Okay, great. Make your wager. But without that,
I'm not aware of
that's why
anything like that here.
you got to get up on the technologies, Brandon. Like you wait until Trevor Linden will bring the cordless phone over, and you guys will get all the new technologies. It's gonna be wild.
I hope so.
The point though is the only reason that exists is because the jurisdiction thing matters. And then, like I said, in the States, you guys have different states have different rules about sports wagering. Even though it's still sports wagering, they've got slightly, again, it's not like night and day different rules, but some of them are different in terms of how they approach it and what the rules are. And as long as you're following said rules, and then again, enforcement will be a different conversation. I'm not too worried about quote unquote regulation falling into it because realistically, they got bigger fish to fry. And I don't think regulation is necessarily at the top of the top of the shopping list right now for reasons. That's it. Just saying for reasons. Just throwing it out there. But an interesting topic, and we'll see if the conversation winds up happening, and what discussions are brought up. But that's why I say the only thing I wanted to make sure I brought up was in terms of Brian Gray's discussion point about consulting a legal professional about it. It's like that's great, and that may have been true at the time, but it might not be true in the jurisdiction. Somebody else may have a different interpretation. It just depends. But we'll see. All right. Anything else we want to hit on for that one, or is that good on that piece?
I'm good.
All right. Then I think that leaves us with comps. I wanted to come back to comps, but in a different angle. Now that Brandon has calmed down from his hulkdom, now we can discuss this. But it's also a different topic. So John, Wade Boggs fan, who I've had on the channel before and had some great discussions with, actually had a video that came out. The gentleman didn't get a chance to see it, but I'll give you guys a quick synopsis. He was struggling a little bit with comps, but also the idea of the eye appeal side of it and personal value. So I think this is something that I think we can still have a very good discussion on because we have some opinions on this. Comps themselves are one thing. In his case, he's discussing vintage. And vintage is where we can bring the eye appeal really into it because that is very important in the vintage side of comps versus modern. Although for modern, we'll give an example where still modern, it can still come into play because the aesthetic of an item makes it more interesting or desirable to you. And that has a factor that is important. But in vintage, we're even more particular about this because you can have a great variance in the value of something depending on eye appeal. We've shown some examples before, but I'll give you kind of an example point. When we're looking at comps, let's assume for the sake of argument, we know how to use Terapeak. By the way, I put a video in the channel. I'll leave a link to it in the description. I literally walk through how to get into it and I show some basic things you can do. Hopefully it's helpful to you. Some people have already seen it and they've gotten some value out of it, and I'm glad to hear. So the point though is, let's assume, Brandon, that we've got 2 items. You're able to look up your comps. You went into Terapeak. You followed my wonderful tutorial. Now you're able to look up comps. This is great. And let's start off with graded, just to make it as easy as possible. So you got a graded card. You go and get yourself a 1956 Topps Jackie Robinson. You're going to get yourself an SGC3. Sounds great. You go look it up. You find some comps. You find some prices. But the one on the dealer table is actually selling for more. You ask the dealer why. These last ones sold for X amount. By the way, I'm not looking up the number. Just whatever number makes sense to you is fine. It doesn't matter for this example.
$10.
But the dealer tells you he's asking for $50 more than the last comp. But the dealer tells you, well, look at the card. That is a much nicer copy of the card aesthetically than the example that you're looking at over there. Because the other one, it's a little dirty. It's had some staining on it. You know, technical grade, they're both a 3. So we're going apples to apples. I'm making it as apples to apples as I can. Same card, same technical grade. But one of them is a little bit cleaner looking. Looks a little bit nicer. The centering on the one on the dealer table is a little bit better. Aesthetically, it's a nicer looking card. So realistically, as someone who has collected vintage for years, I could tell you the dealer has some points. He's got some justification for asking for a little bit more versus one that is a little bit dingier. Maybe it's a little bit off center. It doesn't look as nice. They might both be SCC3s, but to be fair.
Thank
you. He's got a valid case that he could probably get more for it, even though it's the same technical grade. How is that possible? Brandon, why don't you start us off?
So, first of all, the lower the grade on vintage, the more variants you're going to find. The higher grade, the more they're going to be somewhat similar. What I always found in the way I approached when I was buying vintage is I would set a number that I wanted to spend and not a grade that I wanted to obtain. And the reason I did this is just for the exact reason Carlos was discussing. Sometimes you can find a 1 that looks better than maybe a 3, maybe even a 4 if it's a pinhole, or it might have a little bit of paper loss on the back where it had been stuck in a book, but the colors are just bright and bold and the corners are sharp and everything because it was always, protected. So I always took the approach of how much did I want to spend to obtain that card, and then I would shop that price range, whatever grade range that would allow me, and I would try to pick out the best looking copy. When you're trying to go for comps, they're never like, you can't say, well, the last one sold for $1,500. I want this for $1,500. It's not going to work. They're going to have so many different characteristics to them, especially again in low grade, that it's just not going to be apples to apples. They're the same card. They might have the same number on the slab, but the card itself is going to be so much different. And that's really where you just have to understand. Grading was supposed to help fix and solve the debate between buyer and seller. And really, people, when they started putting in the eye appeal, that grade just becomes an authenticity thing. And then you need to pick out which one you think looks best or which one you like. I'm a centering guy. Carlos might like corners. Eric might like no creases, So we all could even say the eye appeal is different amongst the 3 of us, just based off of the 3 different characteristics that we prefer. So, it's just something that you have to look at and pick your preference. And then are you willing to add or subtract based on what you have in front of you presented to you?
Yep. Now, Eric, I wanted to get your take on this, obviously as a collector of the vintage, but I want to specifically focus in on one thing, and then I want to get your angle on this. One thing, though, kind of the reason he was posing the question is he's thinking about it from the perspective of when you're normally using comps, you're trying to use it as a baseline, as an anchor, because obviously we would like to, ideally, we would like the nicest possible card and to pay the least possible. All things being equal, I think everyone agrees universally, we would like to pay as little as possible and get the nicest possible card in a perfect world.
That's my goal.
That would be the best. Yeah. But there is a certain understanding that if you are legitimately going after what is a high quality example, there a premium can be justifiable for the reasons that we just outlined. And by the way, no one's putting a gun to your head and saying you must purchase the nicest. You can buy the dingier looking copy. It will be less expensive. And what Brandon was talking about the third party grading, though, is that third party grading in that sense, though, did in fact do its job. Its job was to determine a technical grade. And a lot of people don't understand the difference between a technical grade and the eye appeal thing. The technical grade is add up the flaws and determine where it should fall on the scale. That's it. It's add up the flaws. That's all we're trying to do here. Because a lot of people don't understand that some card can have a technical grade and still look a lot better than another example that is a quote unquote higher technical grade. Well, how is that possible? Well, it depends. Previously, we had done an example. It was a while back. I'll see if I can locate it, but it's a little bit of a needle in the haystack. But we had an example of a 52 Topps Mantle, and it was one that looked really nice. The color on it was vibrant. Centering was pretty good. The issue was a pinhole, and that pinhole is what prevented it. From a technical grade perspective, literally part of the card is missing. Pinhole or not, part of the card is physically missing.
Right.
You cannot be higher than a poor condition with a hole in it. But from an aesthetic perspective, when you look at that card in your hand, if your eyes don't immediately go to the pinhole, you're thinking, man, this is a blazer. This is a nice looking card.
Mm-hmm.
This is great. And that is why the buyer was willing to pay a premium versus your run of the mill. A PSA 1 with a pinhole is technical grade, the same as a PSA 1 with a chunk of the corner ripped off of another one that's been scraped across the concrete. They're both poor condition cards, but there is one that clearly looks nicer than the other. So the price was adjusted accordingly. The buyer said, for this price point, I'm not going to get a nicer looking version of this card without having to go upgrade and then going even higher in price. Hence, they were willing to pay a premium versus what a valid comp would be on a PSA 1 because they're not created equal. It's not apples to apples, but it sort of is. They're in the apple family, but they don't taste the same. One is a stale apple and one is a fresh apple. But they sort of look the same on the surface, but there's a difference.
The best way to think about it is just cover the number. You know, if you want to do a test and try to see where a personal test on where you're evaluating vintage, get a spread of them, cover the numbers, and then pick which one you would like the best. And then go from there, because that should be the one at that point that is actually valued more because it was more attractive visually. The technical grade is a great thing, but again, the lower you go, the wider variance it could have. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the key. Go ahead, Eric.
Well, I think if I went on a tangent, I just repeat everything you guys said. So it's really down to this: beauty's in the eye of the beholder. I think Brandon make an excellent point that the lower the numerical grade, the more discussion can be had about what people like and where they find that beauty. You know, I have some graded cards that are below a 7 that initially looking at them, you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Why would they, be this number? But I have, that's the number they are. But by looking at them, they look beautiful. So I got to pay a little less and I'm happy. And, I got something I wanted that I find to be beautiful for less money, and I'm satisfied as a collector. So, so I think that's the key. And I think Brandon made a great point on that about the lower the number, the more people can argue with each other over what it's worth, because I think you said, some people need to have, sharp corners. Others don't mind creases. Some people don't care about centering, so.
here's a perfect example. That is a 1. Centered very well. No creases, sharp corners, great color. It has a very tiny spot on the back with paper loss.
Yep. And paper loss is an automatic one, which
Yep,
which
but that's
means
a
it is
1.
graded correctly. It is
Yeah.
graded correctly on a technical grade scale. So that's what I was getting a little earlier. On a technical grade scale, Eric, you've got paper loss. I can't call it more than a 1. That's valid. That is 100% correct. So to me, if somebody wants to argue and debate, my answer is no, you're wrong. If you got paper loss, it should be a 1. That is the maximum. But the rest of it looks really nice. So from that perspective, it's completely okay to say this is a really nice looking card still.
Yeah.
So here's kind of, this leads into the question. So what basically John was struggling with is he's trying to be a budget conscious collector, but he's struggling with the idea of eye appeal versus comp, because again, we're trying to do an apples to apples, but he knows that it's not exactly apples to apples. And so you're that's why I say vintage unfortunately creates this kind of thing where you kind of have to play in this nebulous. Comp is this moving target that is constantly shifting all over the place, because you can have this number to start off with. The last 10 of them sold for this. Yep, but that one had this issue. That one had this other issue. This one had this thing. And then aesthetically, so where does this one that you're looking at rank compared to those 10? Is it at the top of the food chain on the 10? It might warrant a premium then. As at the bottom, it might warrant a discount. Because that can happen too. If it's really crummy, then yeah, you'd be well within your rights to ask for a discount, because I'm sorry, that's a low end example. So low end and high end and middle of the road kind of matters here, Eric.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because everyone has that different eye appeal and different amount of money in their wallet, and they're going to have to factor those things in and find where they meet. And again, I just think I'd be repeating the points that you guys have made. So everyone's going to have different opinions on what looks nice and what doesn't, and what they can accept and what they won't, and then they add up how much money they have in their wallet versus what they think that is worth compared to what they see. I mean, that's what it is. Much easier if it's a 9, everyone agrees it's a 9, and the corners are perfect. There's no paper loss. The centering is good, up, down, left, right. Everything's great. But
That's why a lot of times.
Got a
I'm
3.
sorry, go ahead.
No, just to sum it up, like again, back to what Brandon said, you got a 3. Now I don't like it because it's not centered. All my cards have to be centered. Yeah, but look at the corners. They're mint. I don't care about that. And that's not how I feel, by the way, but just an example.
When I was buying a lot of vintage, I shared some on here, and I used to joke because, and I know this does not appeal to everybody, and there is tons of vintage collectors that absolutely despise it. But if I could find a copy of a card that I was actually in the market and looking for, maybe it had no borders, or it had, something done to it or whatever, if it still looked nice and it was only an authentic and it was in or better than that price range that I was looking to be at, I would buy it in a heartbeat. And I always joked, A just meant affordable, because to me, the number on the slab in vintage, that's all a personal preference thing. If you're truly trying to collect the card is still the card. If it's been appropriately deemed as authentic or altered, or whatever the case, you're still owning the card. I don't mind owning a nice looking authentic copy of some of these great cards, especially if it allows me to save some money. I don't need to know that it's pure and all of that. I'm not trying to get over on anybody, especially if the borders are cut off on it, right? It was just a way to, you mentioned that John was trying to bargain shop. That was my way of bargain hunting. I would look and see, is there any out there that they're authentic, but they have, they might have been missing the borders, or I have. I'll get it out and show you. I bought this one, and I always joke about it because I'm probably the only fool on earth that would buy it. But
Don't worry, it's not going to be another Jason Robertson.
no,
We'll warn you if the pump is coming.
it's
I got
actually
the
a
pump
vintage,
emoji ready to go.
Jason
it's a
Robertson.
vintage basketball card
Vintage.
of good old Dr. J. And I am probably the only fool that would buy this, but it has all of the corners snipped. But the color on this thing is just absolutely insane. And my guess is this was in an old photo album, and they had the little triangle sticky corners and they couldn't get it out. So they cut those off. And so I always called it my Poke J because it has like the rounded corners. So it's my Pokemon Dr. J rookie. But I mean, when you look at it, the color and the centering and everything is perfect. It just had those corners snipped. And I got it for a bargain because, like I said, I'm probably the only idiot on earth that would buy it, but
I don't think so.
I own a Dr. J.
No, I buy something like that, especially at a high priced card.
Especially if it was shaped like a Cheeto.
Definitely, But if somebody wanted $100 for a Gretzky O-Pee-Chee rookie that was in that shape, I'd go, that's slabbed authentic, and I go, okay, that sounds fine.
Yeah, I think there's a price point where a lot of that stuff can make sense. So let me kind of pose this question
for it. But
but that's the point, though. There is a price point. You have to
All
get to whatever that level is, and everybody's gonna have a different answer for what that level is. But let me pose this question then. So let's kind of take the concept of what he was talking about and kind of bring it into something actionable. So what would you suggest then? And I'll open up to both of you. What would you suggest then to somebody who's trying to get comfortable? So again, we're still sticking with the vintage, but then we'll touch briefly on a modern example in a second. But for the vintage sake, what do you kind of advocate or advise for somebody who would like to get comfortable with the idea of occasionally it might be okay to pay up for a great looking copy in a certain grade that goes above comps? Because it's psychological. Now we're getting to the psychological barrier, because we've all had this discussion now. We've agreed that there's a spectrum, especially in the lower end of grades, that there can be some really nice examples here that are right at the tippy top of a certain grade level. But if a dealer's worth his salt, he's going to know that, and he's probably going to price it accordingly and probably be a little bit firmer on that price and say, like, look, I understand that it's this condition level, whatever it is, but look at it compared to its alternates. Look at other examples in a similar grade. And this one, I think, ranks at the top of the food chain. And as a dealer, I might be well within my rights to say, hey, I'm putting this above that last comp because I actually think it's a much nicer copy. So as the buyer, how do you get comfortable with it? But look, you are getting quality, but you're going to have to pay for it in this case. So I'll open up to you guys for some thoughts here.
If you're going for the quality and not the deal, I guess is the way I'll word it. It is a psychological thing because you're wanting the best price. And I think that's why I always approached it with how much did I want to spend. I didn't go after a particular number on a slab or anything. I went with how much do I want to pay, and then I took that number and then put it in to see what that could get me, and then chose the best one at that price. Whether it was a 2 that was higher than other 2s or whatever. Because if you try to adjust your brain on paying above what you're perceiving as the comps at a particular grade level, I think then the struggle is going to come in. Well, how much more do I pay, right? Let's say it's a 3, but it looks nicer than all the other 3s that have sold. But do I give him $50 more? Do I give him $100 more? Do I give him, so you have to also then battle yourself with how much more is this one worth, while also understanding that you might be creeping up into the 4 range. And then if that's the case, you could just buy a 4 that maybe looks even better. So I
think
Brandon,
you just touched on there, though, I think where his struggle is, because you're right. The 4 might look better, or it might be high for a 3, but the
Right.
4s that are in the same price point
Look
aren't as
worse.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
so that's why I say like it is a psychological barrier because there's an argument made here for being cheap, for bargain hunting, but
And
then there's
that's
also the other
why
side. Go ahead.
that's why I always, like I said, I don't know if others take the same approach, but it helped me with vintage is to put a number, not a grade, put a dollar amount that I wanted to be at. Use the comps as kind of your guide of saying, okay, this is what twos go for, this is what threes go for, but then figure out what you want, like how important is that particular card to you, and then put your dollar amount barrier that you want to spend, and then shop at that level and not the grade level, and see what the best one that you like the most at your dollar amount. That way you're not mentally struggling with, but this is a 3 and it's $150 more than the last one. Do I really want to spend that? If you are already at that number, then and you liked it, then boom, it's sold. You don't have to worry about that barrier there because it's
Yeah, so
in your price
you're
point.
saying as long as it hits the number that you were hoping to get and the quality is at a level that you are comfortable with,
Right.
then you don't in that scenario that you're talking about. So this I'm kind of answering John's question. So I wanted to try to provide this information. So what you're getting at though is if you're hitting that number, then just because you're overpaying for a 3, but the quality is there,
Yep.
then you should be fine.
Yeah, because then you're buying at the number that you were comfortable with, and you found a card that you liked, and the two hit. You're excluding what the numerical grade is on it. That becomes out of the equation. You're
Sure.
finding the best copy that you like at the price that you wanted to be at.
Sure. Now, here's a question. I'll throw this one at you, at Eric, as well. So, I think part of the psychological barrier, and again, I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. I'm not playing amateur psychologist, but a lot of collecting is psychology. And I think people need to, we can have another conversation about this and really, because trust me, most of the collectors I know are nuts. So, there's a lot of psychology involved in this collecting game. But in this particular instance, for this specific discussion, I think what we're talking about, if we really break it down to its brass tacks, what we're talking about here is, I won't say fear because I think fear is not the right word here, but it's a struggle with being the one to not even reset the market, but be the one that paid the most. That's why I say the psychological element of it. The card looks right. You like the card. It fit in the budget. All good on those counts. But the only reason the comps even came up is the last 10 threes all sold for $75. The dealer says 125. You're saying like, but the last 10 sold for 75. And he's saying, look at that card. Look at the ones that sold for 75. This one is much nicer than all of those. You look at it, you agree. You look at it and like aesthetically, this card is beautiful. Number notwithstanding, this card is aesthetically, and it's still within your budget. You're not breaking the bank. You're not putting yourself into jam. No jam
To
involved.
answer your question on the psychological aspect about feeling like you're resetting the market, the vintage market is constantly resetting. Like you started off this whole conversation by saying how the market in it is
Yep.
so fluctuating. I don't think that's a problem because the other aspect to it is if that dealer or that seller on eBay didn't have it as a buy it now and they put it up as an auction, it's going to gain more just because it looks better. You're
Sure.
going to
And
have
like, I think
more
that's a
more
valid answer.
attraction.
I think that's a valid answer. I'm merely posing the question to kind of like try to be of assistance here because the
Yeah.
question was posed. And so I'm excluding myself from this. I'm going to be a facilitator in this case. I'm going to defer to you now, Eric. So I'm going to be a facilitator in this case because look, I already have a history of being the highest pay person to pay for a certain item that I really wanted. So I've clearly already, and this wasn't for vintage, it was for modern. For some Medano cards, I am the highest payer on these cards that has ever
Mhm.
been and will probably ever be. I can live with myself, but I understand that it can be difficult to accept that possibility that maybe no one will ever pay that price again, unless, the market keeps moving and whatever. But that's a different conversation. But for the moment, you are the person who has paid the most for this. But because of the eye appeal, it may still be worth it because, to Brandon's point, If it was on the open market, maybe others would see the same thing too. And maybe they would come to the same conclusion and say, this is worth more than the average 3 or whatever it is. Go ahead.
Look at his Drysdale card that he showed, right? It's a 1 because it has paper loss.
On the
Right.
back.
Right, on the back.
Yeah.
Compare that to other SGC 1s. You're going to have creases, corner wear, scratches, off-centered. Okay. I mean, it's going to look like they've been in a freaking car wreck, but it's going to be a 1. So you're at a show, you put 2 Drysdale 1s, SGC 1s, right next to each other, and you put it down on the table. Do you price them the same? Hell no. But they're both the same card, graded the same by the same company, the same number. They're not worth the same.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody comes up and says, "Why is this one $100 more?" I'd look at them and say, you don't have to worry about it because I'm not selling either one to you because you're too stupid.
Eric, the customer service speaks again.
Yeah.
But I think though, the dealer
card
can legitimately say, look at the other ones. The dealer can legitimately respond to you and say, hey, I've been looking at the ones that have been selling. I understand it's a 1, but look at the other examples available. Compare it to this one.
So he says, so you go on Terapeak, thanks to Carlos's video, now that people can find it and use it, and you type in that card. My guess is, in my history with looking at, comps for vintage, the vast majority of them are gonna look like that beat up version. Okay, because that's a typical 1. Looks like it's been through a car wreck. Well, they all sold for around the same number. So that's the comps. But then you put Brandon's there and say, mine looks like it just came out of the pack, other than this. These 10 you found on Terapeak, plus the one I have on the table, all look like they were in a car wreck. Yes, you're comparing apples to oranges. They're both fruit, but they're different.
I want to throw another monkey wrench into the pot.
Go ahead.
And stir it up a little bit, because I know this happens as well. And it throws things into an even bigger, confusing loop. But we can talk about the 1 and, comparing it to others or whatever. And I thought of this because I actually agreed in this scenario with my LCS who submits cards through us. And a couple months ago, we submitted a bunch of T206 cards for him. It was an awesome collection. I had a T206 Rube Marquardt and an SGC 5. It was the old green label. Yep. He sent one, and it came back at 4.5. I looked at his, and I looked at mine, and I would have put his higher than mine any day of the week. Like, I actually was confused at how he didn't get any above a 5 when I was looking at my Marquardt in a 5, because I was like, he had some that just were immaculate, and I thought blew mine out of the water. You also get into this debate of old label, new label. Like, it's well known that a lot of people don't value the old label PSA as much as the newer label stuff. And that comes into play on the vintage a lot of times too. So taking away then the eye appeal, you could have 2 of the nearly identical cards, and then you throw in the scenario of, well, that's an old label, that's a new label. The new label, they're going to want more for. In that scenario, I call bullshit because I know that there is some fluctuation in the way things have progressed or regressed, whichever way you want to look at it, over time. And I do know that is a case that does happen. I honestly told my LCS, I told him what I sold mine for, and I told him there's no way in hell I would take a penny less than what I got on my 5, even though his was a lower grade. It just looked better. Like, I did not know how mine was a 5 and his was a 4.5, but mine was an old label, his was a new label. So,
Sure.
that scenario comes into play as well, and just, like I said, stirs the pot a bit and complicates things a little bit more. But
Yep.
I say when you're buying vintage, just look at the damn card. Like, especially on low grade, just forget the number, forget the label, find the card you want in that number that you're looking to spend.
Sure. No, but I think it was a worthwhile discussion to have, because
Oh
I
yeah,
think given what all the angles we were able to bring to this, the point is it's not a straightforward conversation, because
nope.
we're specifically talking about, if I distill it all down, strip away a lot of the other angles and alternate scenarios and everything, really break it down to something basic. What we're talking about is people fighting a natural inclination that a lot of people have. You're not alone. There's a lot of people have this. We all like feeling like we're getting a deal. And it
Mm-hmm.
is counterintuitive in our mind to pay the premium to get this, because again, while the comp may not matter in the grand scheme of things, it's still an anchor point. Otherwise, you could say, "Oh, that's a really nice card. I'll pay you $1,000 for it." Yeah, it's a 1991 Fleer Common.
Yeah.
There's 500 more of them. So just because you think it's nice doesn't mean you should be paying $1,000 for it. It's helpful to have a little information and go, by the way, there's 3 million of them. You can literally get it for 15 cents. I know you like the card, but you can get it for 15 cents. So I'm not saying here overspend on everything, but I'm saying if we're talking about this genre, this specific category, it may be okay to quote unquote overpay to
Mm-hmm.
get a quality copy that you aesthetically like, but it is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive to the bargain hunter to pay above sticker, so to speak, because in this case, it's not commonly available to the same degree. It's not necessarily rare, but it's not commonly available. It is a nicer copy, which actually puts it in its own separate category inside of the same grade scale, because all the rest of them may be lower by comparison in terms of eye appeal. So you're still getting one of the nicest copies in said grade. So you may have to pay up for that. And if the dealer knows what they're doing, they may have already evaluated that and come to that conclusion themselves. And that's why they put the price on the sticker they did.
You also have to ask yourself, what is your end game? And the reason I mention that is when you're buying low grade, if you're a collector, I'm assuming your intent is to keep it. Maybe you upgrade at some point if you choose to. But what is the end game for the card? Are you going to sell it when you get older? Are you passing it down? Are your kids going to keep it? Whatever. What is the out for it? Because that's then going to also kind of determine. I could sit here and say shop ones because there is a lot of immaculate ones. Like, pinhole cards are amazing. Like, they
Mm-hmm.
get a one automatically, but you can find some of the best cards out there in a one because of that. Or like that example, a small little paper loss or something on the back of the card. You put it in a display case, you look at it from the front. I always like to talk about the arm check. If I hold it out and I look at it and it looks really nice, it's good, right? Because when you put it in display, you're not going to be, sitting there oohing and ahhing. You're going to be looking at it from a distance. But you're also going to be playing in a game that's going to be heavily saturated because, again, the lower the grade, the more copies are out there, and it might be harder to get someone else to see it the same way you did. Again, like I said, we all three could have different opinions on eye appeal of a card. So you have to take that into account. I seriously, I can't say it enough, and I know I've repeated myself several times. Just use the comps as a guide of approximation on what they're going to cost through a grade range, but then determine from that, like, where did you want to be price wise, and then just shop those ranges and try to find the one that you like the best. I say that's a never fail solution because you were comfortable with what you spent and you hand selected the copy that you wanted, that you liked the best. So that would be my suggestion to anybody that wanted to get into vintage.
There you go. So I think I'll leave the last word for you, Eric. But I think overall, a good discussion and some food for thought. So more than anything, it wasn't to prescribe and say you must do this or you must do that. It was more than anything just to give some food for thought. There's some, some opinions and some considerations, because we covered a lot of different possible consideration from both sides of the aisle. And again, I excluded myself from a lot of it because frankly, if I really want the thing, I'll probably just pay what I feel like is appropriate. I'll
But
come up with some number in my head, and if I can live with it, then I can live with it. On that, I have no conscience. But I understand the challenge. I get it.
yeah, you also shop though lower end nice eye appeal copies for like your 53 color set and everything.
Yeah.
So I mean, in a way, you
I cover
do
the whole
that.
spectrum. Yeah, I cover the whole spectrum. But I'm just saying, the only reason I'm using that example though is that there are times where there is something that I want, and I am paying stronger than the average bear, and it's just because, well, look, I understand exactly how difficult the thing is to get. So if it's a tougher item, then hey, beggars can't be choosers. You got to do what you got to do if you want it. If it actually matters to you that much, then you've got to adjust accordingly. Or if I think it's an exceptional piece for whatever it is, I may have to pay the premium. I'm willing to not have a conscience on that if I feel it's appropriate. But I'm not going to do it in every occasion. There can be plenty of items that I'll let go by because, yeah, it's a cool card. Yeah, it's great for the grade and everything. But the price point just doesn't make sense for me. It doesn't fit into what I'm trying to do. But it's really cool. And I can appreciate it as being really cool. But there are other times where like, yep, got to have that. We're just going to take that. Thank you very much. Have a good day. It's like, what? Shut up and take my money. Boom.
Yep.
Throw it at him and be done with it. And just live the rest of your life. So, Eric, last word goes to you. And then I'm going to read some comments. We'll finish off on a lighthearted note with some comments. Go ahead, Eric. Don't buy lemons.
No, yeah, leave them for me. I want all the lemon ding dongs. Don't buy any of those.
That's a quote.
Yeah. Yeah, I just stick with, beauty's in the eye of the beholder, and you need to match that up with how much money you have in your pocket. And when the lines intersect, that's your spot. So
there you go.
That's how I do it.
So love the engagement. If you folks feel like any of that caught you and you have any thoughts on it, feel free to include it in the comment section. I'm going to get into some comments here from the last episode. You guys were very spirited on your responses from last episode, and we appreciate it. Some really good comments in here, and I want to touch on them. But in the same vein, if anything we talked about inspired you to give some thoughts on it, happy to hear it. And if you want to tell Eric he sucks, please do. Just throwing it out there. Just saying.
You wouldn't be the first, so I really don't care at this point.
Saying the engagement. We're all for it. All right. So a couple of comments from last week's episode. So we talked about eBay comps specifically. So in this case, it's going to be another comps episode, but completely different tenor, Ben. Completely different direction on the comps conversation this week. So we went a different way. But in this case, a couple of comments. So first one was Wesker Griff. So Ed chimed in on this one. This was actually yesterday. So Carlos, you asked about if we knew about Terapeak prior to this conversation. I'll admit I did not. So good. We're reaching the people. We're reaching the people, which I appreciate. I don't sell on eBay, so I was unaware of the resource to see more data. So good. So now you know. And if you watch the video, now you know exactly how to get into it and play around with it a bit. So hopefully it helps. With that said, it took me 2 clicks to find it, so it was pretty easy to find on desktop. Excellent. That's what we want to hear. Love the discussion in the episode and the passion that came through Bobbles. He was unleashed! Exclamation point. Hashtag man of peace should have been used more on this one. The man speaks truths. What can I say? He speaks some truths. So thank you, Ed. Appreciate you. Zach here says, Brandon had Eric talking 86 Red Sox level passion in this one. That's a level of passion that's hardly notable. That's a pretty high level of passion right there. The audience knows. They know.
People actually enjoy when I rant. Like if it's a full-fledged, forceful rant, I think people actually enjoy it. I don't know why though.
It's called ratings, Brandon. Listen, I don't want to reveal too much behind the curtain, but I might be, as a man of peace. I know I'm as Kamish a shock as a man of peace. I'm willing to incite violence if it brings on the ratings. Let's go. Let's go.
Down to watch car accidents, Brandon.
Let's go.
No, right. People have always loved my rants, though. I mean,
Listen, rants are listen, you put rant in the title of a YouTube video in this community, views double.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care what it is. The rant, it's like, what was the rant about? Eric was just complaining about the price of chocolate sticks, but he did it for 15 minutes. Views doubled. Rant.
Well, if I have a platform for that, I'd like to use it because I'm not at all pleased with the current pricing of the chocolate sticks. So,
rant. So Tom Bullard here says, do you think Kenny will sell my official Haktua spit? Got to be worth a fortune, and I had capitalized on it 10 minutes sooner. My response was, I think it'd be easier to try to find out what Kenny wouldn't sell. That's my response.
That's true. Did y'all see? He's trying this. I'm being serious right now, and I cannot believe.
All right, 5% more mature. Go on.
He's selling the Bible that was given to OJ from Rob Kardashian. I think is how the progress went. After the Bronco chase or something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. They have file.
I think there's a note in it to OJ from Rob, I think, like written in the front of it or something like that. But yeah, that was like one of the advertised pieces that are supposedly upcoming.
Sure. Yeah.
The Bible front that was gifted from Rob Kardashian to OJ Simpson.
That's lovely.
It would have been even better if underneath it said, OJ said, hey, I could have used this a little sooner.
Yeah.
But thanks for the thought, bro.
Yeah.
If I had the timeline of it wrong, I think I read that it was like after he gave it to him after the Bronco chase or something. But yeah, I was like, wow, we're getting really deep now.
I'm just saying, like I said, if the inscription from OJ back had been like, hey, I could have used this a little sooner, would have been nice. couldn't have hurt. But yeah, it doesn't shock me at all. Tom also had a different comment here. He said, Cheeto Jesus image with flaming Cheeto dust, stigmata next. I also approve of this. Dan's Vintage Baseball PC. Good evening, Dan. Socialist Eric coming out should be the headline. I agree. I agree. My response was hashtag scandalous. Hashtag scandalous. Josh here says, as mostly a hockey collector, I have no connection to the inserts that were released in previous sports. And this also plays a role in the attitude towards the product. Speaking of EX2000. So, like I said, it wasn't a thing in hockey originally. It was a planned release. I did see an interview with Gene McLeod with one of the guys at Upper Deck, specifically talking about this. They had actually designed the product. They had it, the build was done for EX2000 hockey. Obviously, Skybox lost the license prior to that, but had they been able to finish what they had already gone down the path. So this was, for them, a set that never was. Unfortunately, for the reasons we gave, unfortunately, it's too late. You kind of missed your window on that. There's some major issues with kind of where we wound up on it. I get it. But yeah, this was a set that never was. But unfortunately, it doesn't have a legacy in hockey as a result of that. So that was part of our critique. But thank you, Josh. CCC here says, my biggest complaint of eBay does not revolve around eBay making it easy to get actual paid comps, but rather labeling an item sold when it's not paid is misleading at best and fraudulent at worst. Also, Terapeak is not available for those who do not only buy on eBay. Access to Terapeak is only available to users who are proof to sell. And Bobbles and Ball Cards did mention you can create a free seller account, which is true. And I did mention that in my video. I included that caveat right off the top. So it's important to mention it, but thank you for the comment, CC. Let's see here. This was a good one here. So Rob here says, great heated talks. One thing we can all agree on is that a case hit should be worth more than a box. Take Eric's 1-of-1 printing plate. That was an Upper Deck case hit, hardly worth the jar of mayo. My response, always appreciate a cost being measured in amount of mayo. Follow up from Rob, I am here for you. Thank you, Rob. Let's see here. Oh, my good says, Brandon, you need to relax a little. Don't get so worked up. Again, I don't see what they saw. I saw nothing but men of peace. Going on.
Saw nothing.
I saw nothing. Nothing. Now, last comment on here. Bobbles and Ball Cards. I don't know who this dude is, but I'm going to read the comment anyway.
Who he was either.
I'm going to read this comment anyway. Fun conversation as always, and I hope the viewers/listeners enjoy. Just want to make sure to give some context. Near the entire episode, I had my hands behind my head because I was dealing with an issue in my left arm. It was only about position I could have where I wasn't in pain. Also, the rant part wasn't meant to be disrespectful anyway. Oh, it was so disrespectful. You should have heard him before we hit record. He goes, I'm gonna show these guys some disrespect.
Yeah, I'm still very upset and hurt about the entire incident, to be honest.
It was just some passion coming out mixed with some prednisone.
Prednisone.
See, that one I can. Yeah, that one I can't pronounce. Can't help you there. One thing that should be recognized, by the way, I believe it was Marquard, Rube Marquard, that you were talking about earlier. One thing that should be recognized with this podcast and all three of us is there's a lot of times people can have debates and still understand and appreciate each other's takes and opinions, despite what Eric says offline that would get us canceled. Despite that. I know I didn't need to clarify any of this, but I thought I would to give more context. Hashtag Robopump. And I, of course, responded to that. Yeah, Eric sucks, like he said. We're all aligned. We're all agreed. Great comments, everybody. Great comments. That's some great engagement right there. Some solid engagement.
I believe I responded to that, didn't I?
I believe you agreed and said, I do. I really do, being you.
Yeah, I do. I suck. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We're all agreed. We're all listen, we may disagree on a lot of things in this world. We're all agreed on that.
Yeah, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Universal, yeah. But great comments. Great comments. That was some really good engagement. Appreciate everybody who participated and chimed in on that one. I wanted to go through that comment section because there's some good stuff there. There was some good stuff there on that one. I did appreciate.
Sorry I didn't bring the rage out this week, but you guys still please comment.
Yep. Well, actually, speaking of this was not on last week's episode, but it was on the live stream. And this was from Rage, Cards and Grails. He goes, awesome as always, fellas. Also, am I this infinite rage you speak of? No, Rage, you are not. Infinite rage is a historic thing in the annals of history. The Fanatics Overlords brought this to us, and we are appreciative of their bringing of infinite rage. Alas, you, Rage, are not the infinite rage that we speak of. Infinite rage is a very special thing.
Mm-hmm.
Infinite Rage is a millionaire.
Indeed. Good old Dick's Sporting Goods. But yes, and we did touch on the Friday Live. Dick's Sporting Good was the buyer of that. There wasn't too much to it. It's it's a write-off for them. It's a line item to it. Still amusing. I don't think anything will cause to reach that price again. Go ahead.
I didn't hear. I know you said that you found an article that they were going to put it on display. A little bit more into that, why the Dick's Sporting Good purchase makes a little bit of sense, is their corporate office is right up there in that area. So they're probably, supporters of the Pirates and all that other stuff in that area and everything. And so I'm sure they have good plans for that card.
Yeah. Well, also realistically, like I think Paul mentioned it in the chat. I believe the parent company has a valuation of about $16 billion. So $1 million legitimately is a rounding error for them. And so put it in the store, just put it on display. And if you ever sell it, Eric, and you take a loss on it, you just write it off. Like literally at that point for them, they don't care.
No.
It's a nice marketing piece. They just put it in the store on a display. They put a little rotating display there and have a little fun with
I
it.
actually
It's fine.
wondered, because of seeing that they were right there in that location, if they wouldn't take it another step, give it to the Pirates who originally wanted it, but run some contest to where a fan could win that prize package.
They may after they do a little tour with it or something. Who knows?
I was going to say, why not both? Why not both? You could literally display it in the store for a little while and then still do it. You could still do it if you want to.
Yeah, because the prize package, if you were a Pirate fan, that was a hell of a prize package. It's just nationally, and the kid was in California. It made no sense to him, And so if they're right there in that area, they could use that to run some kind of promotional thing and do some kind of giveaway and, trade the card in to get that prize back to give it away or whatever. So who knows? But
yeah, there's no reason. So like I said, for me, if you're corporate head office there, it's a write-off for you. And there's a lot of things you could do. And yeah, you could do a giveaway, you could do some promotion around it and whatever. You could find ways to extract some value out of having it in your possession for a little while. You don't need to hold it forever. You could just have it for a while and still get some value out of it. Again, I'm not going to spend a corporation's money. It's not my concern what they do with their cash. Good for the sellers, for the family and the sellers who sold it. Good for them.
I personally, I know I listened to the Friday Live a bit, and there was this passionate discussion about the price. Mm-hmm. I'm probably going to come at a different angle. I actually was fine with the price, and obviously it's a big risk because Skeens isn't, he's going into a second year. Pitchers blow their arms out a lot, so there's a big risk there. But I actually think in this modern day of cards and stuff that we're seeing, I think these MLB debuts, if I had to place money somewhere, they have the best chance at longevity because that patch does signify something that it can be connected to. There's only one of them. They're not wearing MLB debut patches every day. And so I think overall, when you look at like some of what are these NTRPAs and all that stuff go for that are manufactured patches or player worn or whatever the hell they come up with, these are significant cards that can be tied to a particular moment. And so I do think that they have a better chance at sustaining longevity. But it really depends on, does Skeens continue being this, amazing pitcher and one of the top guys of his era and all of that, or does he blow his arm out and, wind up with a 6 ERA and, 3 years or Strasburg. I mean, look at Strasburg. He's already retired because he had nerve issues. So, but I think if he can have a great career, I'm fine with the number. I think it'd be okay.
Well, I think the issue isn't that I don't. So one part of your sentence, the part of it becoming the key card for a lot of these players, I can get on board with that because you're talking about a game used piece, a specific thing that is linked to a specific moment. So right there, it's going to put it a cut above even the Bowman Chrome Superfractor and stuff like that, which is a great card. But you're talking about adding a game use element, like a legitimate game use element to it, which is great as a card and everything. It's an interesting looking piece. I just think though it helped that specific item was pushed up by the corporate side of it.
Oh yeah.
The specific number, he could be all those things, and I still don't get to that number. Because all you got to look at some of the other prospects that sold, because in the same auction, some of the other MLB debut patches sold, and all of them sold for record amounts of those players compared to some of the other cards they have. So like a Jackson Holiday sold for under 200K. Some of the other guys are like 50, 60K, which by the way is a ton of money. Just so we're all on the same page. That's still a ton of money. And that's still, a head and shoulders above their other previous high sales. So it being the highest one, sure. But the fact it was like, the next highest was 1/5 of that. And this one was the one that was bought by the corporation. It's like, yeah, okay. I don't think you're going to get to that number. But if he ends up being an all-time great, hey, that's fine. Look, somebody paid $3.8 million for a Fishboy card.
Right.
Just saying. So, hashtag bargain. Man.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Who knows? I'm curious to see. I'm kind of in a bad position as a Nationals fan because two of their rookies are the chase players for this year's product. So I've just sat back and watched the people spend the monies. So
hey, it could be worse. It could be worse. As long as no MLB debut patches come out for Jason Robertson, because if one happens, then Brandon's gonna have to sell Eric's house. Not even his own house. He's gonna have to sell Eric's house.
What? Oh,
damn it. Sorry, Eric. Your house got to go. Needs the monies.
All right. I'll tell the boss.
Just saying. So there it is. So there you go. Thank you everybody for participating in this one. I am 1 minute away from seeing if I win my second eBay auction of the night. My first one was victorious. I'm going for one more. I have a snipe set up, so we'll see if we're reporting back later on. But overall, a successful week in the hobby. Some good conversations, some good talks this week. So for Brandon, Bobbles and Ball Cards, scale down from infinite rage to moderate calm rage this week. Eric Sanderson, or if bring it down a notch. Eric Sanderson, or if you just need generic rage.
Typical rage.
Despite all his rage, he's still just a rat in the cage. That's a musical reference. Google it, kids. But anyway, so that's it for us this time around. Episode 121. Thank you to the Watchful Eye of Brett Favre, as always, for participating. Feel free to leave a comment in the comment section if any of the items sparked some interest in you. If you got some thoughts or questions on it, do appreciate it. Also hit the like button so Eric pays for it, because we're going to need to gather funds to buy our MLB debut patches.
Yes, please.
They're expensive. Please. They're expensive. Yes, please. All right, that's it for us. Have a good one. Catch you in the next one.